This is Radio Free XP Season 1. Today, I'm joined by Joshua Aresty to talk about his pairing journey.
My first experience pairing was actually, I would say it was pretty pivotal. It was when I was an English teacher in Japan, because I went from being a solo developer working in a language lab at MIT to then teaching English in Japan and as a pair. And so I always had to stand in front of the class and work side by side with another person. I really loved the way that felt. When I came back to the US, I found a job at MathWorks working on a Rails app, and it was a closed door kind of culture. So I would come into work and I would try to say hello to people, and sometimes I would find people who would say hi back, but not that many. And I ended up getting really lonely working in that office by myself all the time. And I was reading articles about pairing and started to realize that the only way for me to have a sustainable development life, to be able to, say, work on different projects from the one I was working on, was to find a way to make pairing happen. And so I tried to bootstrap pairing at that company, and I tried to sell it as an individual contributor, very low on the totem pole, and I found it really hard. I tried for about 5 years, and I had some, I had some, was it that long? It felt like 5 years. Maybe it wasn't quite 5 years, but it was a long time in development years. And then, but I was also very insecure about my skills, and I didn't feel like I had a leg to stand on interviewing at a company like Pivotal. So I remember when I actually found the job posting well, it was actually a copy and pasted Pivotal Labs job posting that I applied to. I recognized it because I've been looking at the Pivotal Labs job posting, and I saw this one. I was like, this looks like the same thing, but like poorly copied. And
do me a favor and recount that job description, that posting, as best you can.
Oh gosh. I remember. What do I remember about it? I remember it mentioned pairing, I think. I'm not sure if I can remember the posting that well, but I do remember it was clear to me. And so I applied to this job, and I got a call back. And my thinking was there can't be that many people who would apply to this. And so I got a call back, and I ended up getting an interview, and I did pretty well on the RPI, and then I had actually a very interesting dilemma, because I was going through a couple of recruiting methodologies, and I actually got a call from from Pivotal Labs through another channel that they might be interested, but I'd already gone through like 2 rounds of interviews for EMC. and then when I divulged that I was going through this thing with EMC, the folks from Labs said, well, we're actually helping them hire you, so we can't really continue unless you were to say no to this one. So I said, all right, I guess I'm gonna go with the one that I'm already further along in. And that, long story short, I ended up getting hired working for EMC, and that was in Boston. I will skip over how I ended up in San Francisco, but I ended up in the San Francisco Pivotal office, and my first experience in that office was that I got placed on the release integration team. I remember pairing like it was like a fire hose of information, like being plugged into the electric socket. you It was exhausting for the first couple of weeks.
I want to touch
Yeah,
that really quick. So, first of all, what year is this?
that was, oh, when was that? 2015, I think.
And who you were on rel int, and who were your first pairs?
My first pairs, so I paired with Dennis Leon. Um, I don't remember who was first. It might have been Dennis. Chunyi Lu. Um, I think I said that right. I'm not sure. Um, and David Sabetti and Jesse Alford.
Yeah.
So a pretty good mix of people, and I think that was pretty much the whole team at that time. And then the PM was Amit.
Oh man, what a team!
It was a really good team.
That
So that was my first experience. And I was actually on that team for a very long time. So most pivots would rotate after 6 months. Because I was an EMC employee, there was uncertainty around how long I could, or whether my role was going to continue existing. Like there were all kinds of questions. And so I ended up staying on the team for like a year and a half.
wow.
And then, so that's a lot of experience on that team. And then after that, I ended up rotating to Bosch.
Who Dimitri was the PM of, right, at that time?
Yep. It was
Yeah.
quite different.
Yeah, that's a
uh,
different
yeah.
universe. But I want to loop back around because one of the key things that people need to understand is what you said. It's like it was exhausting for the first N weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so my experience is when I would hire people who had never paired or anything like that, I never paired before I came.
Mm.
And what I would tell people is, look, the first few weeks are going to be so exhausting that you simply can't believe it. Like you can't even go home and watch TV. It's all you can do to just stare at the floor until bedtime for the first 3 weeks. Is that your experience?
Yeah. Yeah. Three weeks of that felt like multiple years.
And then
um,
what was the transition out of it?
well, it began to feel energizing. It was kind of like exercise. After a certain amount of doing it, you start to crave it, and it's very hard to not have it.
And so that to me is the heart of pairing. The thing that I would say after that, like you're going to have enough energy to look at the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say in one day it just turns over. It's just like, it's literally like swimming through, jello for the first 3 weeks. And then it's like flying, like where,
Yes.
and the transition is almost, it's nothing. You don't even notice it.
You don't even notice when it changes. It suddenly becomes like breathing. You just need it, and frankly, I mean that was for me that became something that was a requirement. I don't look at any jobs that don't allow me to do it.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time thinking about pairing, and here's the best summation, and I would love your feedback on it. The best summation I've got is that pairing creates a true intimate relationship that is completely, it has no eros in it whatsoever. It's not like you want to touch the person next to you, but you are absolutely entrained. That's really your nervous system, your thinking system gets entrained with that person in a way that's 100% productive. I could literally find no downside other than you are now poisoned for solo work.
That is a fact. Yeah, it's hard to go back. In fact, it's very hard to go back. So, yeah, I think I felt like through the course of pairing, I have gotten to know so many people so much deeper than I ever did in the entire rest of my life. So I consider it as important as like my school years when I was meeting my friends back then, or in fact maybe even more like deeper friendships than that, because I know people that I've paired with, I know like no other.
It- It's it's so difficult to describe to people outside. So you tripped into one of my favorite. So at Pivotal, if you had a one-on-one and it wasn't going anywhere, there was this kind of standard things you would pull out, and one of them was the stay interview.
Mm.
And so, like, why are you not quitting today? Like that was, I thought, I love that when I heard it. And so you have to go a little bit further than that. So I would say, hey, you started as a how many year developer in 2015 at Pivotal?
Well, I think I have been developing. Well, I've been developing since 2003, but I had a gap because I went to Japan. So it was something like 7 or 8, maybe.
So yeah, 7 years is enough to have. That's actually a big phase of a career, right? You are clearly not a beginner at that point.
Yes.
And so let's play this particular game. Let's say everything you learned in development was value one the day you started at Pivotal. It's value one.
Yes.
What today, we're in 2023, so we're like 8 years later. Given that value one at the start, what would you say that what value have you grown to today?
I can't even compare it.
Yeah,
it's exponential. I mean,
it's exponential. That's what you have to say.
Yeah.
You could say it a different way. You could say, hey, look, I added 15 dimensions to what I do that I didn't even know existed on day one, right?
Yeah.
And that right, you don't need a lot of linear space when you have a lot of dimensionality, right? There's a huge amount of area under that curve. And so yeah.
Back then, I think I thought that I only thought about myself as a developer. I thought about the code and like the esoteric of how this thing would work, and so I would get very abstract and very theoretical. I never considered the impact that the software I was building was having. I never considered really thinking from the outside in, or what the business needs were. At this point, I think about the whole business. And I think that is purely because I've been pairing this amount of time.
Yeah, did you ever have to go in the field with Pip? Because release integration was a tough team. Like do you want to touch on like what the challenge was with that team?
So the challenge with release integration was the open source side of integrating all of the components for Cloud Foundry. And when I was there, we were working on basically the transition from CF release to CF deployment. CF release was it was basically the whole Cloud Foundry application as Git submodules, and CF deployment was a single manifest that described how to combine things together. These ways of deploying were so different that it seemed almost like an impossible task to try and upgrade from one to the other with no downtime. And our team was responsible for doing that. So it was really eye-opening to watch how we built that, and how we tested that upgrade path and how we rolled it out. I never got to see a customer, but I did work with the internal what was the name of the team? Not PCF, but the internal team that was running Cloud Foundry, and we were able to help them do that upgrade.
That's where we met, right? We met on PWS, yeah.
Yes,
Pivotal
PWS,
Web Services. Yes. And I believe I met you like right when you started. Like you came on board, I knew about this. I might have even, did we do an interview or anything like that? I remember the EMC program.
We talked a few times. I remember I remember very distinctly at one point, I think you asked me what my goal was, and and I said I wanted to be a pivot, and you said that's a silly goal, which because I was thinking of working for Pivotal as being like a goal, which was not really like, I mean, I already kind of was a pivot. I was thinking like a pivot, and so it's not really about that. It's about how you think and how you act. And long term, I mean, I feel working at Pivotal made me change, and I'm
It,
never going to be the same.
it made my career. There's no way to say it. I walked into that place after 20 years up and down Silicon Valley,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
I walked in and there had never been anything like that. I would talk to guys my age. I'm like, have you ever seen anything like this? And they'd be like, no. And I'm like, great. Can you imagine another place like this? And they would be like, there might be a few places, maybe, but they're not working at this scale, and they're not
Hmm.
producing software like this. I
Yeah.
don't want to go too deep into that. I want to come back to the team because let's be clear about who's on this team. I didn't know you were an MIT grad. So what's your background in MIT at MIT?
So I actually wasn't an MIT grad. I worked at MIT,
Ah,
um, but I worked in the foreign language department, and that's the reason I ended up going to Japan. I did have an interest in helping, so figuring out how to be as helpful in my role as I could be, and so I found that the best thing I could do was work with professors of different languages and study what they were teaching. So I studied Japanese there.
have you read the book Blindsight that Jesse and I did the first episode on?
I know.
you I'm not going to digress into it, but let's be clear. So your job is working with professors to figure out how they learn, right? That's what you
Hmm.
came to this whole thing with. You don't have a computer science background, correct?
Well, I do have a computer science background, but I would not say I'm definitely not a hard scientist.
Yeah, yeah. So it's you on that team. It's Jesse Alford, like
Hmm.
freelance genius, essentially.
Yeah.
It's Amit Gupta, who is
Hmm.
a PhD candidate in math at Berkeley, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It's a big,
right,
yeah.
right. Like the horsepower on this team is totally crazy. And you have this job in this book. It's called like a synthesist. And
Hmm.
so you're sort of a synthesist here, putting all. I mean, that's just what you're doing all around.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
on a team like you were on, this synthesis skill is ginormous. I mean, Jesse is just like a hyper synthesist. That's
Hmm.
he will bolt a concept structure around anything, and then you have Amit who like thinks in braid groups. It's like
Hmm. Yeah.
the the dimensionality at which you could attack this problem was just insane. And then, if that
Mm.
weren't enough, you're bolted into a pairing model that allows
Yes.
you to hyper sync these skill sets. Is that
Yes.
am I over dramatizing this?
No, no, it was absolutely eye opening. Like the whole experience was fantastic. Oh, I also forgot Steve Taylor was on that team too, and he was also amazing. Um,
Yeah, Steve was the person. He was most in tune with the client experience of maybe anyone at Pivotal. Is that your experience of him?
I my experience with Steve was he was just always a really fun person to talk to. He was really bubbly and but also very into heavy metal. I remember just finding him a very interesting study in contrasts, which was to me it was just I liked it.
Yeah, yeah. It's unbelievable. Like every team you're on at Pivotal would be orders of magnitude the best team you were ever on anywhere else. And then you just
That's
switch to another one,
absolutely true.
and then you're like, oh, Bosch, G-Mini Crickets. These guys know what they're doing, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah. Bosch was really cool. I also, I mean, while I was on Bosch, Luan and I ended up building Paris, which you probably remember, or a lot of people at on the fourth floor at least in that building. Um, were using pairs to do their standing. So pairs is like a stand up or a pairing board, which made it very easy to rotate who was pairing day by day. When I joined the Bosch team, I remember we had a pretty sticky pair situation going on. So people would pair with the same people pretty often. And I don't know how much of that is because half the team was remote, or how much of it was just because of the way we ran stand up. But I really wanted more opportunities to pair with different people. And so when Tom, what was his last name? Tom came back from Germany. And he said, hey, in Germany, they're doing this like random pair assignment thing. And I was like, that sounds great. Let's try it. So we were able to push in that direction, and I was able to get sort of a pair random switch going, and that really changed the character of the team pretty quickly. Sorry, go ahead.
Do a little breakdown on that. Why did that change the team?
Why did it change? Well, because when you don't rotate, I think you have a tendency to silo knowledge. And one of the that manifests in a couple ways. One is that the tracks of work that people are working on, you don't spread information about those tracks, because the people who are sticking are going to get deep, and it actually gets harder to rotate anyone off or on to that track of work over time. The second piece is that you don't get as much feedback from different people, because if you're pairing with the same person day after day, then that person gives you a lot of feedback at first, but then every subsequent day gives you a little bit less. And it's also easier for you to say, well, this isn't them, or this isn't me, this is them, right? So the more that you pair with different people, the more you learn where your rough edges are, because other people will, if the same information coming from different sources, will eventually help you realize, oh, I need to watch how I do that. And,
let me touch on the rough edges, right? So one of the things that people, I think, don't say out loud when you say, oh, I pair all the time, they're like, I'm never letting anyone inside like that. I think literally that's what I see them saying to themselves inside. They're like, no one is ever going to see that I can't type, or that I can't do math, or that I have to look up every basic computer science thing. People just, and so when you say rough edges, how did you look at it before you understood what pairing was doing for you, and then how do you think about it now?
Yeah, so before pairing, I think I blamed myself for my failures to understand things. I would look at what other people were doing, and I would compare myself, and I would say, I'm not building this cool website. What I'm building looks so basic and uninteresting. Or I would always be beating myself up around how I would do design and that kind of thing. Through pairing, I've learned that there are different kinds of skills that are valuable, and some soft skills are every bit as important or more important than the technical skills. I think I'm a halfway decent programmer, but I'm really good at the soft skills required to pair. And because of that, a lot of people like to pair with me, which makes it very easy for me to bootstrap a pairing culture, which is not something that a lot of people find easy.
Okay, so now I have to touch on a different fact that you just have to hammer every. There's all these assumptions and all these things you know, but you have to hammer these facts so anyone can understand it. What on a yearly basis, what is the effectiveness of a paired team versus six people working solo on the same problem, roughly in the same space?
Oh, geez. Are we assuming a perfect work allocation or um,
Take the real world example, right? You saw what it
a
looks
real
like.
world example?
Yeah, Cloud Foundry was a real world attempt to do this. It
So,
had rough edges. It had all kinds of. It was not perfect.
yeah,
I mean, it wasn't perfect by any means. Your team was actually hammered from all sides. The thing that most people,
totally.
right? No one
It's
in the
there's no
business.
comparison.
Right. Okay. So
There,
back to a 6-person solo team versus a 6-person paired team. There's honestly no way to compare. Is that your overall assessment?
my assessment would be a six-person solo team is way, way less effective in on average. I mean, knowing nothing else about them, but the reason being, um, it's much easier for they're not probably acting as a team because the typically when people are working solo um, and they don't have lots and lots of meetings to align, they're going to have their own opinions about everything. And that's because people have different sources of information, and it's easier to blame someone else than it is to blame yourself. It's very common for that kind of team to fight in an unhealthy way around what to work on. And so when you ask, well, if you how would you compare them? Well, the pairing team is going to actually all be moving in the same direction, and the solo team is going to be pulling in different directions. So you'll make a lot more progress if you're all moving in the same direction.
Okay, great. So let's just pretend the solo people are like, oh no, we actually here's our alignment model. We know the problem you're talking about. Here's our alignment model. We have it. We have it. Okay,
Yeah.
great. So what's their relative effectiveness? Assuming all 6 of them are aligned, because sometimes you actually get small teams that are insanely aligned, and it
Yeah.
is beautiful, right? I just saw that rarely, but I did see it. But I just saw it on every team at Pivotal. I just saw
Yeah.
across 70 teams. I saw that alignment. So
Yeah. I would not believe it.
fair enough, right? Right. I worked at a place where 4 of us actually, we ran our zones so well that it was not as close as pairing, and it certainly didn't develop the kind of intimacy where you learn and know. But I've seen
Yeah.
teams that are incredibly good. And it's as you were talking about it. The only word for what it's like to pair is it's intoxicating.
Yes.
It
It,
actually it intoxicates you with a capacity.
yes.
I am
To
not a
care.
yeah, and
To
I'm
care.
not a good programmer either. I have a political science degree. I have a deep background in operations. I know how to do that.
Mm.
Like I know how to do
Yeah.
that well. And so that was a great the fact that they could consume my skill set. That's really what would happen is I would
Hmm.
show up
Yeah.
and people were like, "Well, what do you know how to do?" I'm like, "I know how to do this." And they're like, "Oh, we have that problem. Great, let's go." Like,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how that worked. Um, I think so. One of the things I really kind of wanted to touch base with you about was some of the work that I've been doing in Y since Pivotal. Um, so I have to kind of fast forward a little bit to get there, but so on Bosch, I experienced remote pairing. I had half the team was remote, and so I would commute into the office and then put on a headset and work with those folks. And I remember back in the office, we would have an interrupt pair who was responsible for dealing with Slack interruptions. Because when you were pairing, it was very hard to deal with those. Um, and and so I would basically I'd not have to pay attention to Slack when I was pairing, which was awesome. And then I went to a company, Braintree, which was a subsidiary of PayPal, where they had a pairing culture, but it was a stick for a week type pairing culture, which meant that if your pair was out for the day, if they were sick, if they were not, if they didn't care about making sure that they were there for you, you would end up solo. And I hated that. And so I was able to, over time, get that team using Paris as well and switch to a daily pair rotation, which transformed that team. But it stayed within the team. And one of the things that I noticed was that at Braintree, they had a really vibrant Slack culture, but not as great of a pairing culture for me at the time. By the time I left, it was much better. At least my team was. But the and then I started at Artium, and I noticed that we were really good at pairing, but our Slack, well, eventually we moved from Discord to Slack, but our Slack was really quiet, and I started thinking about that, and I realized we were hiring new people, some pivots, but some not, and I realized that if you think about full-time pairing, which would be my ideal, and you think about those people pairing together and not interacting outside of their pair, it looks a lot like quarantine. And if you think about how company cultures are built and you think about the system required to make that happen, you have to break out of that. You have to get from the sort of the pair, sticky pair where you don't get any, say, cross-pollination, to a model which allows for those ideas, the culture, to build outside of the pairs. And so I eventually stumbled across a couple of techniques that have been really helpful for us, and I wanted to share it because I think other pivots trying to bootstrap this kind of culture elsewhere may find them useful as well. I'm not a believer in asynchronous communication as a way to build culture, or spread, say, knowledge efficiently. I believe synchronous communication is key, but the question is, how do you make it easy for synchronous communication to happen while also doing full-time pairing, and having some people that are asynchronous, messages coming in via Slack and that kind of thing. And I think there's a few things you can do. So one of those things that I find really useful is to basically start a water cooler conversation in Slack. And what I mean by that is you can send a message that describes what you want to talk about. And then if you right-click on that message and click Start Huddle in Thread, then people can join you, and you can start answering the question on your own while you're waiting. And if anybody joins you, then you can write down what they say. And this allows people to participate both synchronously and asynchronously. And I found that that's a really useful technique for, say, getting a lot of input and writing it down. The second thing is establishing a policy where taking a break as a pair is always okay. So taking a break solo is generally allowed, but in the office, we used to take breaks as pairs. And in a remote work environment, if you want to have pairs feel good about taking a break and be able to meet other people, then allowing a break as a pair is key. So we have a policy that makes that allowed. Yeah.
Yeah. It never occurred to, right, because you're absolutely right. Pairs took breaks at the same time. No one took a solo break. Like it was like a super rare thing for you to take a solo break.
Yes.
and you would take a break together, and it pivotal. The culture was to play ping pong, and at the height of it, I was playing 8 hours of ping pong a week and loved it. Right, like
Yes.
I loved it. I don't know how much anyone else in the office loved it because I was, say, emotive at the table.
Yeah. But you
But
build those networks and friendship through that, and that's key.
you're cross-pollinated across the whole company, right? Because the best ping pong players are spread all over, and if you actually want to learn, and you rotate in with those folks.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to lose this thread though. So I just love articulating the behavior we actually did. And you're right, we never took solo breaks. Like you had to, you arranged to take a solo break. It was like not a thing.
It wasn't normal, yeah.
Yeah, and it really allowed back to this intimacy thing. It allowed you to stay in the same rough space, but to do something different. When I realized that the ping pong thing is what it was, which was an absolutely also governed universe. In computers, you're governed by what the processor will actually do.
Yes.
And in ping pong, you're governed by what physics will do. You're still governed, and they're totally different applications of your skill sets, but they are skill-based things.
Yes.
And so your break. Okay, so let's see if we can break this down. Your skill. You took a paired break. You shifted to a different skill that you could also share.
Yeah. You're sort of taking that mind space. You're having fun. You're building a network. So you're meeting other people. And so you're building a team at the same time, and a team mentality. So all of those things together allow you to build a culture where everybody enjoys working together. And so the figuring out ways to make that happen remote is a trick. You need a policy to make that possible. And then you also need to make it visible. So this is something I'm still working on, because the culture, we have a policy now, but it's not quite to the point of where everybody feels like they can invite other people in. And I think showing those breaks when you take them, putting them in Slack, because that's where people see things these days remotely, is a habit. And that's something that I'm actively working on and trying to get other people to do as well. And so to that point, there's actually another trick that we stumbled on. So through these water cooler conversations, we started asking the question of how do we make our culture visible outside of our pairs, outside of the company even, and we came up with this idea. Well, the way that you do that in today's world is well, one way is live streaming, but I don't think that we're super comfortable with that yet, although I know some companies have done that. But a very lightweight sort of middle ground between that is to define a convention of a channel where anybody can, where everything that's posted in that channel is an invitation to connect. And so we've created this channel. I've created it in a couple places. It's called Open to Guests. And basically pretty much everything that's supposed to go in there is an invitation for someone to come and watch what you're doing. And this is a really lightweight way to invite people in, because you're not disrupting what you're already doing. You're working on the same thing that you already said you were going to do. You can work on a backlog, and as long as it's open to other people from within that domain, within that company, or you name it, there's not really any cost to you to share that link. And that means that people who otherwise might be sending you a Slack DM to try and get your attention on something can hop in, see that you're busy, and wait until a good time for you to interrupt you, like they would have if they had walked up to your desk in the office.
Okay, let's put a fine point on that. So it wraps up a lot of things. So we did discover in pairing you need an interrupt pair, because you just cannot establish the flow with another person if you keep breaking the thing. And so the interrupt pair was born of grief, right? That was not like, we were brilliant, we didn't know. It was born of grief. Okay, so you've got the interrupt pair, and so part of what you're doing, and so I like, I like open to guests. It's all invitations all the time, right? So if you're interested in that part of building cultures, like how do you? It's not just enough to invite people to the dance; you have to actually invite them to dance, right? There's that whole thing, and so that's one of those things that it allows is like, hey, I'm dancing, like, and I'll dance like an idiot, and you can watch, right? Yeah, like I will dance like no one's watching, right? And so the way that you said it was it's as a politeness mechanism for interrupt where because that was another thing at culture, the pivotal culture that you have to deeply understand, which was like if you were stuck for 20 minutes, you were stuck for 15 minutes too long. Right. The culture there was like, go find the answer. If you cannot find the answer, pivot to the next story. Like never sit there and do nothing. Okay. Yeah. So you've combined some of the important things of interrupt pairs here. You are touching the culture of like, hey, it's an invite place, and you could lurk, right? It sounds the way you talked about it. You're like, it would be totally fine to lurk on what you're doing, even.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Totally fair. That is definitely it's a challenge for people. Like, there's some people who are dedicated lurkers. I'm kind of a dedicated lurker. I'm like, look, I'll sit around and I'll absorb the atmosphere until I can make something of it. So I don't mind lurking. I certainly don't mind people lurking at what I'm doing. So that's interesting. But before you said it, I literally never thought of it like that. I didn't think of it as an interrupt pair solution. I definitely thought of it as an invite solution. It's it's lovely for that. But actually as an observation model, that's really interesting for new people, really interesting.
Yeah.
And then, so I love the lightweight. So I just can't resist. So there are these mimetic models that travel so easily on these chat networks, and I don't have to go through any of the bad ones, right? We know the bad ones, but here are good ones. So have you thought specifically about those, like just like this kind of thing? This is a clear, ultra lightweight. To say that it's lightweight is totally hilarious. It's built on a crazy stack maintained by a commercial company.
True.
Right. Like, but it feels effortless to us, right? Once the subscription is done, it feels effortless to us. Okay. So I love that model. You introduced me to as actually what prompted like, hey, let's get on and talk about this. Because now you have one in the former Pivots Slack going.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. And it's had a little traffic, right?
It has, yeah.
Now we have some user instructions we can post for it as well.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a critical turn to say, hey, this is open for lurking. Like maybe the sub should be lurking fine.
Lurking is fine. Yes.
Lurking is fine.
It totally is.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the, one of the things that I love about remote specifically is that there is no physical limitation of space. So if somebody's sharing a screen, you can have 30 people in the room watching, and it doesn't affect anything, really. It's a lot different to have 30 people sitting in front of a monitor in an office. So this is a superpower of remote work that is hard to replicate in the office.
So that's a scale effect, right? So what you're pointing as these networks allow a strange scale effect that really is... It's not workable if you structure it. You can have 30 people watching a couple of people do stuff. You can, but it's a heavy lift, and you're not doing it on like, oh, I want to do this at in a half hour Tuesday morning. That you can't do it like that.
No.
But with online you certainly can. Okay, well that's a super interesting observation.
Yeah. And then there's another piece of it. So one of the things I think XP really got right, which is not super obvious. So my experience in Japan informs some of how I think about this. I'm a student of Ikebana, the Japanese flower arranging, and it's one of the do. So kado is another word for Ikebana. There's also Aikido and Kendo, like the sword art, and these are apprenticeship models. The way that they actually teach is apprenticeship. It's really similar to the way that XP works. It's all about learning directly from someone else. That's a most efficient way to transfer informal tacit knowledge is that direct observation. There's another concept that is practiced in Japan that is not as readily understood outside, I think, and that's this thing called kengaku. Kengaku is literally seeing and learning. It's the two kanji. And basically what it means is you learn through observing other people doing what you want to do. And in the office, you can imagine it's very easy to observe other people pairing because they're pairing next to you, the next computer over. That's tacit knowledge. Watching how other people pair is something that you're learning while you're in that environment. If you're remote and you're pairing with one other person, there's no way to learn from how to pair, right? There's no way other than dealing with that and trying to do the best you can. You can't learn from watching other people pair unless you have a mob. And this enables that. This allows people to come in and watch other people pair when otherwise they'd be solo.
Yeah. Okay. So I did not know. I knew about apprenticeship. I had never articulated the way you just articulated it, which is that was the whole thing about pivotal, is that there was no moment where you were not a pivot. Mm-hmm. The arrangement of your interview before you were a pivot was done pivotal style. Mm-hmm. It felt differently. The interview that you go to is radically different than any interview almost anyone has ever sat through.
Yes, absolutely.
The 1 day on site is, you could see why you do it and you should do it, but almost no one does the 1 day on site like we did. Mm-hmm. And so there's no point at which you're not a pivot. You're in the culture. You are in the apprenticeship. And as you say, mm-hmm. you are absorbing it all. When you walk to the ping pong table, you're walking by 50 desks full of pairs.
Yes.
Right? And you can hear it. Like that's another thing that most people have no concept of. Like, what does it actually feel like when you're in that room? It's
so
loud
hard to describe.
Yeah. It's loud in a constructive way. If you are pairing, that noise impinges not at all on you. That's the freakiest thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to
bother you.
You don't even hear it.
Yeah.
If you're solo, though,
it's actually invigorating, I think.
You feel, you're being borne up by the wave, right, is essentially certainly what it feels like. Yeah, I'm so glad that I love talking to people who have the soulful experience of it, because you can't. It's hard to describe to anyone. They're like, you sound like you were at a rave, like, except it's better.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, when people talk about going to Burning Man and how cool that sounds, I'm thinking, it sounds cool, but it maybe not any more interesting than my normal work.
Yeah. 2,000 hours a year. That's what you did. And people paid you for it. I mean, I've said it before.
Super lucky.
Yeah.
Super lucky. I'm still doing it. I mean, I try. I can't stop doing it. I need to bring it everywhere that I go.
Yeah. All right. We gotta wrap up. I've held you much too long. So, okay. So, open to guests, right? So the call to action here is go to your Slack immediately, make an open to guest channel, and then post the fact that you're working and lurking is okay. Working and lurking, fine.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm working here. You can find me at this URL is key, because it can be Zoom, it could be Tuple, it could be anything. I'll be here for this amount of time ish. Because I'll probably be here for 3 hours or for the whole day, and then but another important point is do it often. So post every day. Don't just post once and say anytime someone wants to come join here, because those don't feel as inviting. It's posting daily and having that human touch, the sort of wabi-sabi feel, like, okay, yes, this is an ugly invitation to join me, but this is what I have. and you can find me here. And then when someone asks, if they DM you, send the link to the Open to Guest channel, forward that to them instead of replying with the address.
Yeah, here you're showing an awareness of a data path, like a human level data path. 100% get it. Okay. Do you want to say anything about Artium? Like, so part of this whole thing is like, what is up with Pivots? Who has a shop? Are they hiring?
Yeah.
Like, what do you want to say about Artium?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm working for Artium now. Artium is a consultancy. We hire, or we work for other companies doing building software, transforming teams. I think we would love to work with you, and I think we have a pretty unique offering. So if you want to reach out to me or to Ross, I think. Who else? In the Pivotal Alumni Slack, you can find them, Ross Hale, or you can go to our website, www.thisisartium.com, and find us there.
Awesome. And so what would you say to Pivots about Artium? How, if you worked in the San Francisco office, what would you find variant at Artium?
I think you would find Artium to be a really healthy culture. It's got a lot of the things that I loved about working in Pivotal, and we are. I think we're kind of leading edge of establishing remote XP. I don't know that anybody else is quite doing what we're doing, and I'm asking around. So I'm there. I'm not planning to leave anytime soon. So come join me.
Awesome. Joshua, thank you so much for joining us on Radio Free XP. It makes my life to be able to articulate this for people, because people who haven't experienced it are going to want to, and they can't understand it without hearing a personal expression of it. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Tony. I really appreciate you doing this. This was really fun.
Great. Well, we'll do it again. I think we should go through a whole set of what do you do to spread remote XP. I think that's the next one.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. It's a date.
All right.
Joshua,
Cool.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye, Tony.
And we're out. Awesome, man. Just awesome. You should consider, if you're not publishing, like, or just work with Nat. I'm a huge fan of Nat. I think they've got such a clear, an honest take, right? A clear and honest take on what we did.
Yeah.
And
I just talked with them like right before this.
Yeah. You told me you were, and so I talked with them last week, and I'm about to publish their pairing journey model. So I have three pairing journeys to go out: you, J-Ro, and Nat.
Yeah.
And so
it's awesome. I love the way that you talked, or like invited me to share the whole pairing journey, and I can go a lot deeper on a lot of those things too, because it definitely changed my life. I mean, I consider there's like a handful of things that have changed my life. Going to Japan was one of them, and working at Pivotal was another.
You enter a new dimensionality. I mean, there's no I know I sound crazy to people. I'm like, you go from 3-dimensional thinking to 12-dimensional thinking, and they're like, gee, many crickets, man. Like I got nowhere to put that. Like,
I'm pairing with someone this past week. I started pairing with someone who had never heard of pairing, and I'm just watching him go through the experience of realizing what this is, and his eyes are wide open, and he's just blown away. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sad that I'm going to be leaving you in a week because I want to show you more and like help you understand, because we're leaving the engagement, and it's the company kind of ran out of money, I think, or is in a little bit of financial trouble. But yeah, it is the kind of thing that does change the way you view everything, really.
Yeah, it changed me. It channeled me into I don't even know what to call it. I think, I don't know, they call it enlightened leadership or enlightened capitalism or something like that. I'm still a total capitalist, partially because people love working, and they love working on meaningful things. And finding things that are valuable to other people is how you determine if it's meaningful, right? And so
Yes.
I love all that, but the management models I learned as I was working in the Bay Area were, they were like backstabbing, psychopathic based kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I arrived there, and it was the only place that didn't practice psychopathy as a baseline model.
It's so true. Yeah. And it's sad, but yeah, I mean, Boston didn't quite have the level of psychopathy, but it did have a bad. It just I didn't like working there. The culture was very different. San Francisco culture was easier for me, but yeah, it's. I mean, I think I've struggled my whole career with, like, should I be going up into management or should I be staying as an IC? But I keep staying as an IC because I love working on a team, and I like leading from the bottom. It's just trying to. Sometimes I disagree with what leadership is doing, but I love the people I get to work with and working with those people and showing them what I know so much that I can't really bring myself to distance myself from that unless it's for them. If I'm doing it to try and help them, then that's a different thing. I mean, this whole thing, me trying to actually have conversations outside of the company, is because I care. It's not because I am doing it for myself. I don't really want to publish. I just want people to know how to do it.
Yeah, well, I feel like I wanted to do this as soon as I left. I'm like, this place has to be articulated, right? It has to be described. And I took my whatever 3-year bounce around, and here I am, and it's the most valuable thing I do right now. And everyone does want to talk about it, but no one wants to do the production. Like, okay, well, Jesse and I have run the loop. Jesse Alford is working with me on this, and so we've run the ugly iterations, and now I could turn this conversation around in about 15 minutes. And as long as we're disciplined on the front and the exit, all you do is clip the front and the back, and you're publishing. And for a pivotal audience, I don't. Yeah, and the whole thing is, this is for pivots. Like, if other people listen for now, great. But I need to run a couple seasonal iterations here. And see if any pivots even care. Like, for me,
you could share the editing stuff as an open to guest. By the way, people might join you.
Yeah. The other thing is, this thing that we're using, Squadcast, it has a backstage. And so you could also post the backstage, and you can promote people to stage and back and forth, right? And they can chat. Awesome. And the whole, so this thing, which comes with a Descript subscription, this whole thing is a literal stage all set up for what you want to do. I thought about, if I had known, I would have posted the backstage for this conversation in open to guests. I didn't clear it with you first and things like that, but I assume, given your point of view, that would be fine.
That would have been fine. Yeah.
So we'll do that. We'll do that for next time. Here, awesome. Serious man. Think about how to put what you're talking about into an outlined or whatever structure you like, so that we can articulate it step by step. You give me the list, and then I'll try to stay on.
Okay.
And then it's articulated, and then there's a place like you can go and we can answer questions from it and the whole 9 yards.
Awesome. Yeah. Next time, I'll be happy to do something more, a little more structured. This time I'm kind of, it's the first time I've talked to you since Pivotal.
Yeah. It's been years. Yeah. And I apologize for not like getting, normally the problem, scheduling is a problem because there's only so much time.
I know.
and all of that. So, but I'm happy to catch up now if you want. It's the top of the hour.
I want to.
Yeah.
I want to, but I think I need to actually go to my client today. It's my last day on the project.
All right.
This afternoon, I'm wiping my laptop.
Oh yeah, from them. All right, we'll post it on, and my afternoon I think is going to be going toward family here, but post it, and I'll catch you up on what I'm doing. I could certainly, I'll post in I understand now better how to use guest invited or
Open to guests. Yeah.
open to guests. And so I understand better how to use it now. And so I commit to using it because I need a pair. A pair is very helpful to me. So
That's awesome. Oh man, I love it. Please do. And I'll join if I can.
all right, perfect.
All right.
All right, Joshua,
All right,
we'll
Tony.
talk soon, man.
Talk soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Radio Free XP. If you're interested in helping with graphics, bumper music, or other aspects of production, or if you'd like to be on the show, please contact Jesse Alford or Tony Hansmann on the Pivotal Alum Slack. You can also reach us via email at jesse.alford@pm.me or precept@gmail.com, respectively.